I don't even know why I'm posting this. Maybe I just need to vent. Maybe I need someone to tell me I'm not crazy. Either way, here it is. My name's Ethan. I'm 38 years old, a CEO of a mid-sized tech company, and up until a few weeks ago, I thought my life was solid. I had a beautiful wife, Julia, 34, who I've been married to for 7 years. We had the dream life, a penthouse in Manhattan, luxury vacations, dinner parties with people I never actually liked, but hey, that's part of the package. Julia and I met when I was still climbing the corporate ladder. She was vibrant, charming, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and have everyone hanging on to her every word. She made me feel alive back then, like I wasn't just another guy trying to make something of himself. I thought we were partners. I thought we were solid. But lately, something's been off. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I told myself I was overthinking things. That's what people say, right? Don't let paranoia ruin a good thing. I work long hours, too long honestly, and I figured maybe Julia just felt distant because of that. But the signs were there. She started dressing up more. Not just for nights out, but 4 quick runs to the store or meeting a friend for coffee. Expensive perfume, one I didn't recognize. Texting more. Laughing at messages and tilting the phone away whenever I walked by. She got cold. Like, emotionally absent. I'd kiss her and she'd turn her cheek. Conversations started feeling forced. When I asked her how her day was, she'd give me vague answers, almost like she was reading from a script. And the late nights? Those were the biggest red flag. I work a lot, but Julia? Julia worked from home. She had no reason to suddenly start staying late at the office, when her job was literally answering emails from our couch. But she always had an excuse. Last-minute dinner with Emily. Sarah needed a girls' night. Gym ran long. Every single time, there was an explanation. Every single time, she smiled and brushed me off like I was overreacting. But I know my wife. Or at least, I thought I did. And I know when someone is lying to me. I started keeping track. Not in a creepy way, just mentally noting how often she'd go out. How often she'd avoid intimacy. How often she'd come home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I told myself I was being crazy. That I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Until the night it all changed. That was the night Julia made her biggest mistake. It was a Wednesday night. A normal, unremarkable Wednesday. I'd worked late, as usual. My meetings had run over, my inbox was a disaster, and I was mentally drained. I was so close to just heading to a bar for a drink before going home, but something in my gut told me to go straight there. And that's when I saw it. I pulled into the garage of our building and parked next to Julia's car. Except, Julia wasn't home. That was odd. Usually, when she went out, she took an Uber or got a ride with her friends. Her car never left. But that night, she had driven somewhere. I shrugged it off at first. Maybe she really was out with Emily or Sarah or whatever other excuse she'd given me that morning. I took the elevator up, stepped into the penthouse, and something immediately felt wrong. I don't know how to explain it. The place smelled different. Stale air, like the windows had been shut all day. No dinner in the oven. No half-empty wine glass on the counter. Just silence. I loosened my tie, tossed my keys on the counter, and checked my phone. No messages from Julia. Nothing. Then, out of habit, I checked the security app on my phone. We have cameras in the hallway outside our apartment door, not inside, because Julia always said it felt creepy to have them watching us. I pulled up the feed. And my stomach dropped. At 7:23 p.m., Julia had left the apartment. Alone. Wearing a dress I'd never seen before. At 7:58 p.m., she returned. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her in. He was tall, well-dressed, probably mid-40s, salt and pepper hair. Confident. Comfortable. Like he'd been here before. My heart started pounding in my chest. My mind was screaming at me to stay calm, to find some reasonable explanation for this, but I couldn't. The video showed her letting him in. No hesitation. No looking over her shoulder. And then, this part still makes me sick, she smiled at him. Not just any smile. Not the polite kind you give to a neighbor in the hallway. It was soft. Intimate. The way she used to smile at me. Then the screen went dark. Julia had turned off the hallway camera. I must have stood there, staring at my phone, for 10 minutes. My entire body was frozen. My hands were shaking. My stomach was in knots. There was no mistaking what I had just seen. I set my phone down. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my mind was eerily clear. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I didn't even sit down. I just grabbed my coat and left. Because if I stayed in that apartment a second longer, I don't know what I would have done. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. The streets of Manhattan were buzzing, people heading to bars, cabs honking, the usual chaos of the city. But for the first time in my life, it all felt distant. Like I wasn't even there. My wife had brought another man into our home. Into our space. The place we built together. And she had turned off the camera. That was the part that stuck in my head the most. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't innocent. That was calculated. I kept walking. Past coffee shops where Julia and I used to sit together on lazy Sundays. Past restaurants where we had anniversary dinners. Past places that just hours ago had meant something to me. Now, they were just reminders of what an idiot I had been. At some point, I ended up at a hotel bar. I don't even remember getting there. I just remember sitting down, ordering a drink, and staring at the condensation on the glass like it held some kind of answer. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to extremes. I don't go snooping through my wife's phone. I don't track her location. Hell, up until that night, I never even questioned her loyalty. But the moment she turned off that camera, something in me snapped. I needed proof. So I called an old acquaintance, Marcus. A guy I met years ago through business circles. Quiet, efficient, and from what I'd heard, very good at digging up the truth. I kept my voice steady. Told him I needed information on my wife. Told him to follow her. Find out exactly what she was doing. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "Give me a week." I finished my drink, went up to a hotel room for the night, and tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, there was still some kind of explanation for all of this. But deep down, I already knew. I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal ran. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room that smelled like stale air and regret. I stared at the ceiling for a while, letting reality sink in. Last night wasn't a dream. I hadn't imagined it. Julia had brought another man into our home. And I was doing something about it. I checked my phone, no messages from her. Not even a "where are you," or a half-assed excuse. Either she hadn't noticed I didn't come home, or she just didn't care. I got up, showered, put on a fresh suit, and did what I do best. I got back to work. Because what else was I supposed to do? Sit around and obsess over it? Let it eat me alive? No. I had a company to run. Employees who counted on me. A life outside of my soon-to-be ex-wife's betrayal. But the second I stepped into my office, I felt it. That creeping doubt. That itch in the back of my skull. I tried to focus, but every little thing set me off. Someone laughed down the hall, reminded me of Julia's laugh. My assistant brought me coffee, same brand Julia liked. Someone mentioned dinner plans, made me think about all the nights Julia had worked late. By noon, I wasn't getting anything done. And then Marcus called. "Got something for you," he said. Not much yet, but enough to be suspicious. My stomach twisted. I locked my office door and sat down. Talk. She met him for lunch today, he said, matter-of-factly. Upscale place. Private booth. They weren't acting like co-workers. I gripped the phone tighter. How so? Marcus sighed. Let's just say if I were you, I'd be pissed. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. Pictures. I'll send them over. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. I hesitated before opening the files. And there it was. Julia. Laughing. Smiling. Leaning across the table with that flirty teasing look I hadn't seen in years. Her hand on his arm. Him looking at her like she was the most interesting woman in the world. I swallowed hard. My hands felt numb. There was no more room for doubt. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't insecurity. It was real. And I was about to find out just how deep the knife had been buried in my back. I sat there staring at the photos for what felt like an eternity. Julia. My wife. Laughing. Touching another man. Looking at him the way she used to look at me. I should have been furious. I should have thrown my phone across the room. But you know what I felt instead? Cold. Like something inside me had just shut off. I wasn't going to rage. I wasn't going to scream. That's what she expected. That's the game she was playing, gaslighting me, making me doubt myself, lying straight to my face while she snuck around with this guy. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I called Marcus back. How far do you want me to go with this? He asked. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm, controlled. Follow her. Find out everything. I don't just want proof. I want leverage. He chuckled. Smart man. I'll be in touch. I ended the call, took another look at the pictures, and forced myself to breathe. Then, I did what any good CEO does when they're preparing for a hostile takeover. I started planning. That night, I went home like nothing had happened. I walked in at my usual time, loosened my tie, and found Julia sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't been out having lunch with another man, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes. Hey, you're home early, she said, setting her phone down. Early? I was right on time. But sure, let's pretend everything's normal. I walked over, kissed her on the cheek, she barely leaned into it, and sat down across from her. How was your day? I asked casually. She stretched, letting out a fake sigh. Oh, you know. Just errands, lunch with Emily, gym after. The usual. Emily. Again with Emily. I nodded, playing along. That's nice. How's she doing? Oh, good. Just stressed about work. I almost laughed. The confidence in her lie was insulting. She didn't even hesitate. Didn't stumble. Just straight to my face. And that's when I knew. She wasn't just cheating. She was comfortable doing it. She thought I was too busy, too distracted, too naive to figure it out. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to ruin her little fantasy world. I played my role perfectly that night. I smiled when she spoke, laughed at her pointless little stories, even poured her a glass of wine like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't spent the whole day preparing to tear her world apart. And the best part? She bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Julia had no idea. No idea that I had already started shifting money into accounts she couldn't touch. No idea that I had called my lawyer to start preparing the paperwork, just in case. No idea that I had checked the deed to the apartment, my apartment, in my name. No idea that I had a private investigator following her every move, collecting enough evidence to make sure she couldn't weasel her way out of what was coming. I wasn't going to react emotionally. That's what she wanted. That's what people like her expect. Anger, yelling, desperate pleas to work things out. But I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to make sure that when she finally realized what was happening, it was too late to do anything about it. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to speed things along, Julia made a mistake. The next night, she was going out again. Same routine, same casual excuse, same fake smile as she kissed me goodbye and walked out the door. But this time, she took her car. That was new. Something in my gut told me this was going to be big. So the second she left, I called Marcus. She's on the move, I told him. Follow her. I sat in the living room, sipping my whiskey, waiting for the inevitable. My phone was on the table, face up, screen dim. I watched the seconds tick by. Then the vibration. A message from Marcus. You're not going to believe this. I picked up my phone, my heart steady, my hands calm. Try me. She's not even being careful anymore. She just walked into a hotel with him. No sneaking. No disguises. Like she doesn't even have a husband. A hotel. I took a deep breath, then let it out slow. My jaw tightened, but my mind remained clear. Focused. Because now, I had everything I needed. I stared at my phone for a long time, letting the weight of the words sink in. A hotel. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That was the final confirmation. The undeniable proof that Julia had moved on. I just hadn't gotten the memo. But that was fine. Because I had. I didn't call her. Didn't text her. I just sat there, sipping my whiskey, feeling an eerie sense of calm. The kind that comes when you finally see things for what they are. When you stop caring. Julia had been lying to me for months, possibly longer. Lying effortlessly, smoothly, with no hesitation. The late nights at the office. The girls' nights. The perfume that wasn't mine. The cold distance in our bed. I had suspected it, felt it creeping into the cracks of our marriage, but now? Now, I had evidence. And evidence? That gave me control. Marcus sent over the pictures a few minutes later. There she was, my wife, standing at the entrance of some five-star hotel waiting. Looking around like she didn't want to be seen. And then, right on cue, he arrived. The same guy from before. Older, well-dressed, confident. He placed a hand on her lower back as he led her inside. And just like that, the door shut behind them. I zoomed in on Julia's face. She was smiling. I don't know why, but that was the part that got me. Not the affair itself. Not the hotel. Not even the deception. It was the smile. The way she glowed for him, the way she used to glow for me. Like she was in a world where I didn't even exist. That was when I made my decision. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to erase myself from her life. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pace the floor or drown myself in whiskey either. I just sat in the dimly lit apartment, our apartment, thinking. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. That stage had passed. I wasn't even angry. I was done. Julia thought she was playing a game. Thought she could keep me in the dark, feeding me excuses while she ran around behind my back. But she had underestimated me. She thought I was too busy, too trusting, too oblivious to notice. She thought she had time. She didn't. By morning, I was already in motion. I went straight to my lawyer's office, laid out everything I had, and made it clear, I wanted this handled. Quietly, efficiently, and in a way that left Julia with absolutely nothing. The good news? The apartment was mine. The better news? All our joint accounts were already in the process of being separated, my assets protected. The best news? Julia had no idea any of this was happening. She was too busy ruining our marriage to notice I was slipping through the cracks. By the afternoon, I was back at the apartment, overseeing a moving crew. Everything that was mine was packed and loaded. The pictures, the furniture, the clothes in my closet, gone. The only things left were hers. The things she'd have to come back to and realize that I had disappeared. I left nothing behind. No note. No explanation. No confrontation. Just silence. And when the last box was gone, I stood in the empty living room one final time, pulled out my phone, and sent one last message. I'm not coming back, Julia. You'll have to live with the mess you made. Then I blocked her number, walked out the door, and never looked back. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. Didn't want to be anywhere near that apartment when Julia walked in and realized that I was gone. Instead, I checked into a luxury suite across the city, poured myself a drink, and waited. Not for her to call, I had already blocked her. Not for her to apologize, she wouldn't. People like Julia don't apologize, they justify, manipulate, shift blame. I was waiting for the moment she realized that she lost. Marcus was still keeping tabs on her. He sent me the update that evening. She got home around 9:47 p.m. I could picture it in my head, the click of her heels in the hallway, the hum of the elevator, the casual way she unlocked the door, expecting to come back to the life she took for granted. Then, silence. Confusion. She probably thought she walked into the wrong apartment at first. Nothing looked the same, because there was nothing left. No photos. No furniture. No trace that I had ever been there. And then, her phone lit up. The last text she would ever get from me. I'm not coming back, Julia. You'll have to live with the mess you made. Marcus told me she stood there for a full minute, staring at the screen. Like her brain couldn't process what was happening. Then, the panic set in. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. She tried texting. Blocked. She ran to the closet, Empty. Checked the bedroom, bare. Opened the drawers, nothing. And then she did what I had been expecting all along. She tried to rewrite history. First, she called her best friend. He's overreacting. This isn't what he thinks. Then, she tried mutual friends. I don't know what's going on, I just came home and he was gone. And finally, she tried reaching me through work. That was the part that made me laugh. She actually thought she still had access to me, that she could spin her way out of this. By the time she emailed my assistant asking to talk, I had already left instructions. No response. Ever. Julia wasn't just dealing with the end of our marriage. She was dealing with the fact that I had cut her out completely. No explanation. No confrontation. No dramatic fight where she got to cry and make excuses. Just nothing. And I could only imagine how much that was killing her. I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. No anxiety. No second guessing. No Julia. Just silence, the kind that didn't feel suffocating but freeing. It was strange how quickly peace could settle in when you finally let go of something, or someone, who had been weighing you down. Julia, on the other hand, was unraveling. Marcus sent an update early that morning. She hadn't slept. She spent half the night calling her friends, leaving desperate messages, trying to make sense of what had happened. But there was no explanation that would change the outcome. No excuse that would undo what she had done. At first, she tried to act normal, going through her usual morning routine, probably convincing herself that this was all a misunderstanding, that she could fix it. But the longer the silence stretched, the more the panic set in. She had always been in control of every situation, every conversation, every argument. She knew how to spin things, how to manipulate emotions, how to make me feel guilty even when she was the one at fault. But this time, there was no one to manipulate. No fight to win. No narrative to control. By noon, she sent me an email. The subject line was predictable. Please just talk to me. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. The same tired script, denials, excuses, some teary declaration that it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe even a pathetic attempt to shift the blame onto me, make me the villain in her story. I didn't care. I didn't respond. I just forwarded it to my lawyer and went about my day. By evening, the panic had morphed into something else. Rage. Marcus told me she had reached out to mutual friends, painting herself as the victim. He's punishing me. He's making this worse than it needs to be. That kind of thing. She wasn't apologizing, she was angry that she no longer had access to me. That I had the audacity to walk away on my terms instead of sticking around to feed her ego. And then, in a move so desperate it was almost laughable, she showed up at my office. Like she could just storm in, demand an audience, and I would sit down and listen. As if she still had the right to my time. My assistant handled it beautifully. Mr. James isn't available. Julia tried to push past her, insisted she wasn't leaving without speaking to me. My assistant, unbothered, repeated herself. Mr. James isn't available. Security had to escort her out. She wasn't used to this. Wasn't used to being ignored. Wasn't used to a world where her actions had real consequences. That night, as I sat in my hotel suite with a drink in my hand, reading the report from my assistant, I could only smile. Because Julia was finally experiencing what it felt like to be truly, completely powerless. And I wasn't going to give that power back. The silence was breaking her. I could feel it, even without hearing from her directly. The thing about Julia was that she thrived on control. She needed to be the one calling the shots, dictating the narrative, deciding how things played out. The second that power slipped from her grasp, she started spiraling. Marcus sent another update the next morning. She was unraveling faster than I expected. After being escorted out of my office, she had spent the night trying to get in touch with people who might still hold influence over me, my friends, my colleagues, even my parents. She was throwing out every possible bait, hoping someone would get me to talk to her. It didn't work. My parents? They already knew what was going on. They had seen the red flags long before I did. My father's only response to her frantic call had been a calm, "I think you should speak to Ethan's lawyer." My friends? Most of them were mine before they were hers. And the ones we shared? They weren't jumping to defend her. I hadn't spilled the details to everyone, But people noticed things. The cracks in our marriage, the way she had been pulling away, the way I had slowly stopped mentioning her in conversation. Nobody was particularly shocked that something had happened. By noon, she sent another email. Longer this time. It started with denial. "This isn't what you think. Please, let's just talk." Then, excuses. "I've been feeling lost, and I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything." Then blame. "You shut me out. You buried yourself in work. What was I supposed to do?" And finally, the plea. "Ethan, I love you. I don't want to lose you. Please, don't let this be how our story ends." I stared at the words, unreadable, detached. A few weeks ago, that email might have broken me. Now? It was just insulting. She wasn't sorry. She was panicking. She wasn't trying to fix what she broke. She was trying to crawl her way out of the consequences. I didn't respond. Didn't even forward this one to my lawyer. Just deleted it. And the silence continued. The silence was eating her alive. Marcus kept feeding me updates, but I didn't really need them anymore. I already knew how this would play out. Julia wasn't the type to handle being ignored. She wasn't the type to sit quietly, reflect on what she had done, and take accountability. No, Julia needed control, and when she couldn't get it, she lost her grip on everything else. By day 3 of radio silence, she had completely unraveled. She started making more calls. Not just to my friends, but to my business partners. She actually tried to spin some story about how I was going through something and needed people to talk to me, to knock some sense into me. As if I was the one acting irrationally. My assistant handled it before I even had to say a word. "Mr. James does not wish to communicate with Mrs. James." That was it. No room for discussion. No chance for manipulation. Julia was locked out of my life. And that was driving her insane. She sent another email that night. Longer than the last. The desperation was palpable in every word. At first, she tried bargaining. "I know you're upset, and I understand why. But can't we just sit down and talk? Please, Ethan. I don't care if it's just 5 minutes. You owe me that much." I owed her nothing. Then, she tried minimizing it. "You have to know that it wasn't serious. It was just a mistake. I got caught up in something, but it didn't mean anything. You and I, we have years together. A history. Are you really going to throw it all away over one stupid mistake?" One stupid mistake? A months-long affair wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again. And she had made that choice every time she snuck around, every time she kissed him, every time she walked back into our home and lied straight to my face. I wasn't throwing anything away. She had already done that for me. Then, she switched tactics. Turned the blame back on me. "You've been absent for so long, Ethan. It's like you don't even see me anymore. You've been married to your job for years, and I've just been standing here waiting for you to remember that I exist. I never wanted to hurt you, but I felt alone. I felt abandoned. What was I supposed to do?" That part made me laugh. Because this was the same textbook excuse cheaters always used. They don't take responsibility, they justify. I had never abandoned Julia. I had built a life for her. A life where she never had to worry about money, never had to struggle, never had to fight for anything. I had done everything I could to support her, to be her partner. And the one time she felt bored? The one time she wanted more excitement? She burned everything down. And then finally, she ended the email with the threat. "If you keep shutting me out like this, I don't know what I'll do. I'm losing my mind, Ethan. I need to see you. If you ignore me again, I swear I'll..." I didn't even finish reading it. I closed the email. Deleted it. She was flailing, looking for anything to make me react. But I wouldn't. Because the moment she got even a single response from me, she would twist it into some grand reconciliation arc in her head. She would convince herself that I still cared, that there was still something to salvage. There wasn't. She was screaming into a void. And I had never felt more at peace. That night, I poured myself a drink, walked out onto the balcony of my hotel suite, and just breathed. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself. Wasn't doubting whether I was making the right call. Julia was experiencing exactly what she deserved. She had destroyed our marriage piece by piece. Lied with a straight face. Smiled while betraying me. Thought she would get away with it. Now, she was left with nothing. And that was exactly how it was going to stay. I knew Julia. I knew how she thought, how she operated. She wasn't just unraveling, she was desperate. And desperate people? They do stupid things. I was waiting for it. The moment when she'd crack. It took 5 days. 5 days of silence. 5 days of unanswered emails, blocked calls, doors that wouldn't open for her. 5 days of her slowly coming to terms with a reality she had never prepared for, a world where I no longer existed in her life. Then, it happened. Marcus called me in the middle of the afternoon. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone, something sharp, almost amused. "She's at your office again," he said. I sighed, rubbing my temple. "Let me guess, demanding to see me?" "Oh no." She skipped straight to crazy. I glanced at my watch, exhaling slowly. "How bad?" Marcus chuckled. "She's outside, standing by the front desk, yelling about how you're ruining her life." I laughed. A real, full-bodied laugh. She had finally snapped. Julia had spent years crafting this perfect image of herself, the charming, put-together woman, always in control, always graceful. But now? She was standing in the lobby of my company, making a scene, hoping that if she caused enough of a commotion, I'd be forced to come out and deal with her. She didn't get that chance. Security was already handling it. Marcus stayed on the line, narrating. "She's trying to tell your assistant that she just wants to talk to you. Now she's saying you're being cruel and heartless." He paused. "Oop, there it is." "What?" "She just dropped the divorce threat. Said if you don't meet with her, she'll file first." That made me grin. She still thought she had leverage. "She can file whenever she wants," I said, amused. "The papers are already sitting in my lawyer's office. She's the one with everything to lose." Marcus laughed. "Yeah, I don't think she's figured that part out yet." I could only imagine it, Julia standing there, frustration bubbling under her fake composure, realizing that nobody was listening to her anymore. Marcus continued. "Okay, now she's crying. Security's moving in." A pause. "Oh, this is interesting. She's calling someone." I frowned. "Who?" "I'd bet money on her friend Emily." Emily. The name Julia had used as her cover for months. I checked my watch again. I had a meeting in 15 minutes. I didn't have time for this circus. "Tell security to remove her," I said. "If she doesn't leave willingly, escort her out." "You got it, boss." I ended the call and put my phone away. I didn't need to hear how it ended. I already knew. Julia was losing control. She had tried every trick in her book: denial, bargaining, blame, threats. And none of it had worked. There was only one stage left. And that was when things would get ugly. Julia was out of moves. Denial had failed. Bargaining had failed. Blame had failed. Even her pathetic attempt at threatening divorce had fallen flat. So now, she was about to do the only thing left. Burn everything down. I expected it. I had been waiting for it. Marcus gave me the update later that evening. After security escorted her out of my office, she did what all cornered manipulators do: she flipped the script. First, she called everyone. Friends. Family. Mutual acquaintances. Anyone who would listen. The story she told? "I don't know what's happening. Ethan just left me. He won't talk to me, won't tell me why. I came home and he was just gone." She played the perfect victim. The poor abandoned wife who had no idea what she had done wrong. Who had been blindsided by her cold, unfeeling husband. And for some people, it worked. I got a few texts, old friends who were out of the loop, people who didn't know the full story. "Hey man, what's going on with Julia? She sounds really messed up. You good? Julia just called me in tears. She's saying you ghosted her." But the people who mattered already knew the truth. I didn't explain myself. Didn't argue. Just responded with the same thing every time. "She knows exactly what she did." And that was all I had to say. But Julia wasn't done. That night, she sent another email. It wasn't like the others. No fake remorse, No excuses, no half-hearted attempts to fix things. This time, it was pure venom. It started with rage. You think you're so smart? So above everything? You're a coward, Ethan. A pathetic, weak little man who ran instead of facing me like an adult. Then, the insults. You were never enough for me. You were always so caught up in your stupid company, so obsessed with money, you never noticed how miserable I was. Maybe if you had been a better husband, I wouldn't have had to find someone else. Then the threats. I'm not going to let you get away with this. You want to ruin my life? Fine. Let's see how you feel when I start telling people who you really are. And then finally the plea. Please, Ethan. Just talk to me. Just once. We can fix this. I still love you. I know you love me too. That part almost made me laugh. She had gone full circle. Anger. Hate. Threats. And then? Back to desperation. She thought if she threw everything at me, if she lashed out, if she tried to hurt me, if she begged, something would stick. Something would make me respond. But all it did was prove what I already knew. She had never loved me. She had loved the control, the security, the power she had over me. And now that it was gone, she was breaking into pieces. I didn't reply. Didn't even acknowledge it. I just blocked her email. And just like that, the last door between us closed. Julia had lost. And she was finally starting to realize it. Julia was spiraling. The cracks in her mask had turned into full-blown fractures, and now she was scrambling, desperately trying to glue together the pieces of a life that had already fallen apart. I had seen her put on an act for years. I had watched her charm people, manipulate conversations, control every situation with her carefully measured words. Julia was a master of image. She had spent our entire marriage curating the perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect version of herself that the world was meant to see. But now, that image was crumbling. And for the first time ever, she couldn't control it. Marcus called me again in the morning. She's at it again, he said, amusement lacing his voice. You want to guess where she showed up this time? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Tell me. Your old apartment. I blinked. She went back there? Oh yeah, he said. She showed up with a suitcase. I guess she thought you just moved out for a few days and she could waltz right back in. He let out a short laugh. Security had to explain to her that the lease had been terminated. I smiled. That had been part of the plan. The apartment was never hers. The second I left, I had it cleared out and shut down. No forwarding address. No loose ends. Marcus continued, his tone amused. She flipped, man. Full meltdown. Screaming at the poor guy at the front desk, demanding to get inside. Told them it was her home and that she had rights. She doesn't, I said flatly. Exactly. He chuckled. Anyway, she made such a scene that the manager had to step in. They offered to call the cops to mediate the situation. Guess what happened next? I already knew. She ran, I said. Marcus snorted. Like a damn cockroach. Soon as she realized she wasn't getting back inside, she bolted. Probably hoping no one caught her acting like a lunatic. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Julia had built her whole life around being untouchable. Being the woman that everyone admired, the one with the perfect home, the perfect marriage, the perfect lifestyle. And now? Now she was homeless, humiliated, and spiraling. The irony? She had done it all to herself. I checked my phone. 3 new emails from Julia. I didn't open them. Didn't even have to. I already knew what they said. First, denial. This has gone too far, Ethan. You're being ridiculous. Just talk to me. Then blame. Why are you doing this to me? After everything we've been through, how can you just shut me out like this? And finally, the desperation. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Please, just tell me what you want from me. What I wanted. Nothing. That was the part she still didn't understand. She thought I was playing a game. Thought I was pushing her away to punish her, to make her feel guilty, to make her realize what she lost. But that wasn't it. I didn't care anymore. She didn't get that, and maybe she never would. I deleted the emails without reading them. Marcus sighed on the other end of the line. So what's next, boss? She's gonna keep trying to reach you. You wanna keep blocking her, or are we moving on to the next phase? I hesitated for a second. Just a second. Then, I made my decision. We move on, I said. It was time for the final step. Julia was losing grip on reality. She had always been able to talk her way out of anything. She had always been able to control the outcome. Whether through charm, manipulation, or sheer emotional exhaustion, she had never been in a position where she truly lost. But now, she had nothing left to hold on to. Marcus kept me updated. After being kicked out of our old apartment, she had tried everything. She checked into a hotel for a night, probably still convinced she could smooth things over and get back to her real life. But by the next morning, when she realized I wasn't coming back and the hotel wasn't a sustainable option, she started reaching. First, she tried her friends. Most of them had distanced themselves already. The ones she had used as alibis for months, the Emily and Sarah names she kept dropping, were no longer picking up her calls. People could smell desperation. Then, she tried her family. Her mother answered. Listened. Probably even sympathized. But I knew Julia's mother. Cold, pragmatic, ruthless. That woman didn't believe in second chances. The second Julia had been exposed as the cheater, she became an embarrassment. So that door shut too. And that was when she finally broke. It was the 6th day of silence. The longest I had ever gone without speaking to her since the day we met. That night, Marcus called me again. His voice was serious. She's at your office again. I sighed, rubbing my temple. Of course she is. She's not trying to get inside this time, he said. She's just standing there. Outside. For the past hour. I frowned. What? She looks bad, man. Like, really bad. For some reason, I walked over to the hotel window, staring out at the skyline. I wasn't sure why. It wasn't like I'd see her from here. Maybe part of me just needed to picture it. She's waiting for you, Marcus continued. Like if she stands there long enough, you'll just come down and talk to her. My grip tightened around the phone. I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered the photos. The hotel. The months of lying. The smirks. The stolen moments with another man while I was working to build a life for us. I remembered the disrespect. And whatever pity I had felt. It vanished. She can wait all night, I said coldly. I'm not coming. Marcus exhaled. Figured you'd say that. A pause. You sure? Yes. Because this was the final cut. She had spent our entire marriage believing she could do whatever she wanted without consequence. She had been so sure that I would always be there. But not anymore. I wasn't walking through that door. I wasn't giving in. I was done. She just hadn't accepted it yet. But she would. Soon.